in the 1990s, Dr. Stanley Bierman used to do very impersonal oral history interviews with great philatelists. He'd often invite them to his home in California, or he would do it in a hotel room. Those videos are available online, and they are some with collectors who are still with us today. And those interviews are both personal, they're warm, but they're also great oral histories of what we've done in the hobby and how we've gone about doing it. We've decided to commit to doing it again. After Dr. Bierman passed away a couple of years ago, when we put him in the Hall of Fame, we thought there is no better way to honor Stan Bierman than to resurrect the project he started and dedicated himself to so much. So our first installment in this, we thought would be great to start here at the Great American Stamp Show, and I couldn't think of two finer people to participate in this. First is our interviewer, who is our current APS president, but she's so much more than that. In fact, I joke that she's so big in this hobby that she's just Cheryl. And, you know, she has a long history as she is the curator emerita from the Smithsonian National Postal Museum. She has been the APS president since 2023. She was elected to the board first in 2018 as a vacancy role. You filled in as a vacancy, and she's a member of the Citizen Stamp Advisory Committee, and I can run down an entire long list of things that she's accomplished in her lifetime. But again, remember, she's just Cheryl.
Kind of like Cher, you know, one name, you know, everybody knows who it is.
Today, she's going to interview a very dear friend of mine. He was the APS past president, so he's part of the problem when they hired me in 2015. Wade served as president from 2008 when Nick Carter passed away until 2013 when Steve Reinhardt took over. Wade was chairman of New York 2016, and I consider that to be a fine international show, and I appreciate his leadership for that. It's the same thing. Wade has a long list of accolades that I could throw at him. He's a Luff Award winner. He is an all-around great guy, and we're happy to have both of them here today. Without further ado, Dr. Cheryl Gons and Wade Saadi.
Thank you, sir.
So I have known Wade over 25 years. I've witnessed his passion for our hobby, as well as his generosity of his time and sharing his skills. He is a true living legend and philatelic icon, whether you think so or not. And so it's my great honor to interview him in what we hope will be the first of a series of interviews with philatelic icons. So Wade, you have collected a lot of different things. And I would say one of your primary focuses was classic United States stamps, and you've been very involved in the United States Philatelic Classic Society. So I'd kind of like to know what drew you to classic US stamps and how your involvement became in that society.
Well, the short answer is that I've collected from when I was a child, and I collected the Liberty series and the Prexis, used condition, of course, because I couldn't afford anything more than that as a child. And I worked my way backwards. So I didn't get to classic US until I went through the entire 20th century, collecting used, you know, examples. Then I guess, you know, school and adulthood and maturity got in the way of collecting. And probably till about 1978, 1979, did I start collecting again. And I continued from where I left off with the 20th century, and then went back to the banknotes and the Colombians and all that stuff, and kept going backwards until I got to the 1847 issue, which, you know, as an adult, I was in a different financial position than as a child. So I started to collect classic United States, and I built a collection of 1847, the 5 and 10 cent issue. And then I went as far as I could with that. So I went back to the 1851, 1857 issue and started to collect N61, 1851 to 61. The whole gamut of shades and varieties and everything. Then I got into, after I filled all the spaces, I got into the postal history aspect. of the early US issues and started to collect cancellations and shades and all this other stuff. So that's kind of how I got there, piecemeal and over a very long period of time.
Was there anyone in your family who was a collector, or was there a reason that as a child you were drawn to stamps?
Yes, it's called my Aunt Adele.
Oh, okay.
For one Christmas, she got me a Minuteman album. I think it was called Minuteman. If it wasn't, it was not a full Scott album. It was what kids had back then. That's in the 1950s. And her husband was a honcho at the United Nations. So unknowingly, he would rip the stamps, not through the stamp, but around, on a piece, and give them to me from all countries of the world.
Nice.
So I learned, the names in the like Sverige was Sweden, and Helvetia was Switzerland, and that kind of stuff. So it was very interesting to me at the time, and that's when I put the albums down and waited till I got older to be able to play back in stamps.
I still have my Minuteman album. So going back to when you started to go back and fill in all your spaces, somewhere along the line, you discovered there was an organization in our hobby that specialized in classic stamps. You
Yes.
became quite involved.
Yes, I did.
You served as an officer.
Yes, I've been kind of lucky. I'm through my professional career, which was in between child collecting and serious collecting. I built businesses. So team building was something that was, I don't want to say natural to me, but came to me easily. So I was a team builder, and that helped me to volunteer in philately for boards of directors and eventually officerships. So I've experienced a lot of that in my life, more than I ever thought, but it came naturally to me.
And also within that same organization of the Classic Society, you did quite a bit of original research and publishing of your articles.
Yes, since 1990 something, late in the 90s, I believe, I've been a section editor for the Chronicle of U.S. Postal Issues, which is the publication for the U.S. Classic Society. And so I was originally the 1847 section editor, and more recently, the 1851-57 issue editor. So writing is something I enjoy doing, research. It's, it's fun. It's like, I went to a technical high school where I had 13 periods a week of chemistry alone for 2 years, and all kinds of chemistry. So science is something that been in my background since as a child. I had a chem lab that was the size of a regular bar in a restaurant, and it was a lab bench. And I built it, myself. I had a phone built into it back in the 1960s. So I was a little precocious in the sciences, and research and interest in how things are printed and how things are made was natural to me, more so than to many others, I guess.
So you held leadership roles in the Classic Society and in the Collectors Club of New York, but you also held a lot of leadership roles within the American Philatelic Society, including president of the APS when Nick Carter passed. And I think this was also a time of a little turmoil within the society. And I was hoping you could talk a little about your presidency, some of the hard decisions you had to make, and what was going on at that time in the period of the society.
Well, Nick passed, and after that, the board elected me. I wasn't elected by the membership. My first term as president was to fill out the rest of Nick's term. And I was then, as president, a member of the finance committee. And the controller of the APS came to me and said, you know, we have about 6 months of money left before we're out of cash. And like, although I was chairman of the board of vice presidents previous to being chosen as president by the board, I had no idea. I was totally in the dark. And Nick had been sick for a considerable amount of time previous to that. So this came as a big shock. 6 months worth of money before we're, you know, out of payroll. It was a shock. So I was incredible. Again, team building, very fortunate. I'm not going to name people because there were so many who were helping in righting the ship, but particularly John Barwis and Kathy Johnson helped right the ship. And it required a layoff of about 5 or 6 people, full-time employees. It seemed at the time the APS staff was the easiest way to save money right away. We had huge expenses at the match factory to refurbish the facility so we could rent it. So cash was hard to come by. And that's basically the baptism of me as president of the APS. You know, you think it would be a joyous time, but it was tough. And some of the people that we had to let go had been with the APS. APS staff is very stable. I would say that the average person at the time I became president, the average staff person, had been there 20 plus years. So these weren't transient people going in and out. So it was hard. It was very hard. But, you know, things turned out. This guy named Scott English, I don't know if you know who he is. We were fortunate enough to get him through Mick, who had worked with Scott, McZays. And what he's done in the last, since he's been here, I guess that's 10 years, 9 years, he's retired the debt. We had mortgage debt of 6 million plus that's been eradicated through careful leadership and financial responsibility. And I didn't have anything to really to do with that. I was retired by 2013, but it's something to be proud of when you can look over what's happened and how such an important part of the hobby was saved.
We're financially stable, but also the total remodeling of the building. I mean, when we got the building, you could see through the roof. So you had to have some things you're proud of when you were president, some good moments. Do you recall anything then? Or was it all tough?
No, it wasn't tough. I don't want to say this. Please don't misunderstand this, but it was fun.
It was fun. Good.
It was enjoyable because progress was being made and a difference was being made and things were being righted. It took a long time, but all good things take a long time. Nothing is instant except oatmeal. You know, everything else is a project and underway. So it was, you know, again, letting people go is not fun, but it was fun to see the end result of the hard work and the sacrifice that people made.
Good, because I really, myself, we both have the same idea that these institutions we are involved with are part of keeping this hobby vibrant and growing. And linked to that, you and I worked together at the Smithsonian National Postal Museum, where you were vice chair of the Council of Philatelists.
Yes.
And we had some major projects then. Do you want to talk about any of the things you're very proud of while you served on the council?
I'm still on the council, although I've been absent for the last couple of years a bit because of health issues. But that's something that I look back on with a big smile on my face, because there was nothing wrong with what was there. Alan Kane was the what would you call him?
Yeah, he was the
CEO,
director.
of the National Postal Museum. Some guy named Wilson Home,
Mhm.
who I worked with intimately on the Classic Society. As a matter of fact, when he passed away, I was vice president, so I statutorily became president. And he asked me, when he became the curator of the National Postal Museum, he asked me to come aboard on the council. And I worked closely with Janet Klug, who was APS president at the time, as well as a great thinker. And we reshaped the way that the NPM was. It was, we used to go there, the council did, twice a year, or maybe 3 times a year, depending, and listen to reports. We had no jobs, we had no functions, we had no responsibilities, we had no homework. So Janet and I put this into place at the time, and it became a working council, which was great because so much more was accomplished, because staff doubled, basically, because the council was 12 to 15 people at the time. It actually got to 20 or so, even more over time, but I think it's shrunken down again. So that was I don't want to say the other things were not pleasant, but the National Postal Museum and the council was fun. That was real fun.
And you
So-
were also very involved in the opening of the world's largest stamp gallery, the William H. Gross Stamp Gallery.
It was. That was a thrill, because we had everything was. If you haven't been to the Postal Museum, in order to go into the Postal Museum, you go into a lobby, a beautiful old post office lobby, I believe, gorgeous. But then you had to go down an escalator. In essence, you were in the basement, and that's where all the exhibits were. And there was limited room, and you couldn't really go anywhere to build out. So when the restaurant that occupied what is now the Gross Gallery lease was up, Alan Kane, who was nothing short of a magician, got the Postal Service to rent the space, and money was raised mostly by the guy named Bill Gross, through Charles Shreve, who was integral in getting this gallery completed and funded. And it's now the cat's meow of postal museums throughout the world.
Well, I know we both stood on the front patio
With the shovels.
with shovels to initiate the efforts, and I think it was a very thrilling part of our careers in philately. But the big biggie for you, the big biggie, president and chief executive officer of the International Stamp Show, New York 2016. And I would love to have you tell us a few stories about that experience. I think if your wife told the stories, she probably never saw you for years, but I'd like to hear some of your stories about it.
Yeah, okay. So for some reason, and I don't really remember why, back in 2005, I was foolish enough to throw my hat in the ring, or New York's hat in the ring, to host the next international. Yet to come was Washington in 2006. And Michael Dixon was kind enough to allow me to attend the meetings that they were having. And I did for about a year. all of the meetings of the committee to put on the show in Washington. And we competed for the right to have the show. I guess I could say Columbus, Ohio, or New York City was the choice for the international, and the board voted to choose New York. There was nothing wrong with Columbus, but it was New York. So what happens in New York? So before we have, excuse the expression, a pot to you know what, we had no money. We got a grant from the Philatelic Foundation and from the Collectors Club of New York to finance the things that we had to put on the line, which were hotel guarantees, the Javits Center deposit, the decorator down payment. We didn't know if we were going to survive. I mean, we had no idea how many. This is years away from selling tables and frames. And frames, where are we going to get frames from? You know, where are you going to get 4,000 frames? You can't ship them from other places because it costs too much. Then you have to store them, and then you have to fix them. So the experience was, I guess, nerve-wracking is a good word to use. Not knowing if we were going to survive fiscally, the experience. We were careful. All of the expenses that Steve Rod, Roger Brody, and I, as the triad of the operating committee, we paid everything ourselves. There was nothing charged to the company, to the entity whatsoever. So that was good because it saved a lot of money. But what made the difference is that when you have an international show or any stamp show, you have these charges from the decorator, and they are in excess of what the Javits Center was charging us to use the space. Yeah, it's insane. And a lot of it is, I don't want to say wise guy controlled, but wise guy controlled. So you're not going to leave them holding a bag. Otherwise, you get a horse's head in your bed. So we were very nervous up until the end. Because it's a menu that you get from the decorator. You don't get a fixed price. So you don't know where you're going to be fiscally. You're going to have an abundance of cash left. You're going to be in debt. But as it turned out, through the fundraising, which was headed by Charles Shreve, we raised about $750,000 of donations plus. And at the end, after the show, we were able to disperse about that much, if not a little bit more, to philatelic organizations as a gift. So the show turned out well, but we didn't know it until probably a week after the show ended.
Wow.
And we didn't know if we were going to owe money to someone, to the guys you don't want to owe money to, or because the Javits Center was paid, the hotels were all paid. That's it's paid by the people, and we had no guarantees for the hotel. We weren't on the hook if. So for, I would say, 3 to 5 months after 2016 closed, I was affected by it. I don't want to say it depressed me, but I wasn't myself, and meanwhile, I'm running an executive search business, a real estate business, and I have all these other things going on. And I was just, I felt like I had gotten beat up.
Yeah.
So that was hard. But, fortunately, it turned out to benefit the hobby. People say the show was very good, and there was money left to distribute. So I guess those are the earmarks of a successful show.
And having had that experience, and because you almost know too much, but maybe you have lessons learned, or you have ideas about the future of shows both nationally and internationally, pros, cons, things people should think about?
Yeah, it's very hard for Western countries because there's no per se government funding of these things. In Asia, for example, the governments pay for these shows. So if it's shows in China or Thailand, they put the show on and they hire people to run the show. So there's no profit loss. It's what it is. In the Western countries, South America, North America, Canada, many parts of Europe, particularly Western Europe, it's difficult to get the books to balance because it's such an expense, such overhead. So it's tough. It's tough to put shows on. We were very, very fortunate because, again, of team building. The team that we had of 30 people, 30 central people, was invaluable to the success of the show.
And
Again,
volunteerism, it's just the basis of our
right.
hobby.
Well, Mark Butterline, who is now the executive director of the Boston show, was our volunteer coordinator. And he came to me and he said, "Can I do this? Can I do that?" I said, "Do whatever you want. We need volunteers." So within 3 weeks, he had 450 volunteers, 450 people that weren't even stamp collectors. They were retired people that came in and said, "What do you want me to do?" So that's, again, the team, building a team. I think that's, I don't want to say the story of my life, but team building is such an integral thing to accomplish stuff. Because if you're doing it alone, it's very, very, it's almost impossible. You just can't be in all these places at one time. So
I think it also speaks to the very social side of our hobby. I mean, for many of us, the relationships we make with other philatelists is as important as the pieces of paper we collect. And if you feel you're part of a team and that you're working toward something that has a sense of purpose, that it's very rewarding.
John Borwas was speaking once at an APS, I think a Tiffany dinner, and he said, "Look around, because once your albums are closed," not meaning your life, but you sell your collection or whatever, "look at the friends that you've made. Look at the fraternity you've created." And that speaks volumes for our hobby. It's, how many of you do I know intimately? Many. And throughout the organizations I've been involved with, I have friends nationally, internationally, from going to stamp shows, from peddling 2016 to international dealers and postal services, and attending probably 12 to 13 international shows in the 10 years of building the reputation for the show and the desire to participate in it. You make a lot of friends. And my wife and I, Gail, deserves as much credit as I do for helping me, being behind me, not being jealous of the time I'd spent away, and she'd accompany me whenever, whenever possible. She wouldn't come with me in the summer months because the grandkids were in Long Island. So it's just, it's been a great ride.
Yeah.
I sound like I'm making my own eulogy, but I'm not.
Yeah, no, you have a lot of time left for collecting. So I'm going to shift gear a little. I know you collect things other than stamps. So I thought maybe you could share a few of those interests. And then I know of one very special item that you acquired in your life. And I thought maybe you could talk a little about that special document that was autographed by famous people as well. So first, tell us a little about other things you might collect.
What else do I collect? I collect coins. I have a type collection, TYPE, which is one of every design that the mints in the United States, all US, everything that is uniquely different. So there'd be a Lincoln Cent that came out in 1909, but one of them on the back has VBD, Victor D. Brenner. So that's different than the 2010 issue that doesn't have that. And then there's different mint marks, but I don't collect the various mint marks. That's what a typeset is. So in the Indian sense, the penny that preceded the Lincoln penny, there might be 7 different coins. So I have one of each of those. And it goes back to, I have gold pieces from 1796, 97, $5, $10 gold pieces. And the mystique of that is that, you know, maybe Alexander Hamilton held this in his hand,
Yeah.
or who, you know, God knows who, but that was a lot of money back then. So the Secretary of the Treasury might have had access to that. Anyway, so that's a passion of mine, in coin collecting. To talk about for a moment the document you referred to. So I've been in technology. I'm an executive search. It's all in technology. So I've been involved with computers and the people that operate them since 1973, 72 even. One guy that made a big impact in my life, who I recruited for and serviced his company, was this guy named Steve Jobs. And in 1976, he formed a company with a guy named Steve Wozniak called Apple Computer. To make a long story short, there was another guy involved that got Wozniak to work with Jobs because they didn't trust each other. Yeah, there's a whole story there, but that's not relevant to what Cheryl, I think, is asking. So in 1993, when Steve Jobs was working at Next, he had been fired from Apple. That was before he invented the iPhone, the everything. Guy was a genius. We worked with him at Next Computer to do staffing and support, and converted one of his operating systems so it would work with IBM operating systems. It's a long story. Short story is in 1993, Apple, under a guy named Scully, was going out of business, and people said it was going to go out of business. So this contract that this third party, who's not relevant to the conversation, sold the copy. He had one of 3 copies of his partnership agreement with Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, forming the Apple Computer Company, not the incorporated that came later. And I bought that in 1994, 5, 6, around there. I don't remember. So when Steve Jobs passed away, and I've forgotten the name of the author, the New York Times author that wrote the book about Steve Jobs' life, in the fall of 2008 or so, I don't remember the date, I felt it was a good time to kick the tires. I paid $5,000 for that contract in the 90s, and it went to Sotheby's for sale. And they said, it's not going to bring a lot. It might bring $100,000 or something like that, which is still a good return, but it sold for $1.6 million. So it was like party time. So I set up a trust fund for my grandkids for their college. I forgot what New York State calls it, a 526, I think, 529, whatever it is, 529. And we set it up and put a big chunk of money in there, and made a lot of donations to my church. Anyway, So that was a glorious time. And who knew,
Yeah.
And so one of the conditions of the sale were that Sotheby's make me a high quality image in a frame of the contract of the 6 pages, and they did, and it hangs in my basement. So
Fun. Many of us over our philatelic lives have had exceptional mentors, favorite dealers, lifelong friends who've influenced us and inspired us. Do any names come forward in your life where you just feel that they have warmed your heart and you owe so much to them?
without sounding like a brown nose, everybody.
Mhm.
I learned stuff from all the people I came in contact with. They taught me something.
Mhm.
Uh, no name in particular,
Okay.
but you learn a little bit from everybody. Has at least one good quality. Sometimes you have to dig deep to find it, but it's there. So if you can glean that from the different people you meet over time,
Mhm.
it makes you better.
Good.
So I would say there's no one person that shepherded me.
Mhm.
I would say in being accepted, not to be taught, but being accepted in the hobby. George Kramer and his then wife, she passed away, took me in, as did Lou Grunin and his wife, to meet people in the hobby that I was daunted by, let's say.
Mhm.
So that was a great help for me to meet people that made the decisions in the hobby.
Yeah, networking is, it's not
everything.
exactly mentoring, but it's also so important.
Right.
Mhm.
And I try to give back to that, the mentoring part. It's so important to help your successors in whatever organization, because you have a wealth of knowledge that you've and wounds
Mhm.
that you've gotten on the way, and they can benefit from that knowledge.
Well, kind of a follow-up to that, you've been a very strong supporter and advocate for young people in the hobby and helping them move forward into leadership roles. Did you ever find certain methods worked better than others for an intergenerational help to younger people?
I'd say the APS has a thing that Alex Hyman brought into light called YPLF. He founded it, I don't know, 15 years ago or so. And the APS brings in, through sponsorship of individuals or organizations, brings in 3 to 5 people a year, kids. I don't know the age limit. I think it's 16 to 21 or something like that, and brings them to this show, takes them to the National Postal Museum, takes them to Bellefonte, and inaugurates them. I don't know the right word. Initiates them,
Mhm.
baptizes them in the hobby. And to date, at least 6 or 7 of them are devoted in the hobby. They they become dealers, writers, exhibitors, employees of auction firms, the
Mhm.
Philatelic Foundation. It's I don't want to say it's a miracle, but not everyone. I mean, I think that Alex said recently, I don't know the exact numbers, something, there were 35 people, and of them that have been in this program, YPLF, Young Philatelic Leaders Fellowship. And of the 35 or so, 20 are still in the hobby.
Mhm. It's a good record. Mhm.
So I support that.
Mhm.
The Classic Society, Alex spoke to the board meeting this morning, to the Classic Society, and mentioned that the Classic Society has financed or sponsored whatever, 8, it's $5,000 a year, 8 times have sponsored a fellow. And that's the most that any organization has done. So it's it's an ongoing process. Not everyone's going to, stay with stamp collecting. College comes in the way.
Mhm.
And I mean, we have an Air Force major who's an avid collector. And, the people that worked for auction firms, and it works. But again, you can't expect every seed to become a plant. So.
Well, tied very much to youth and leadership roles. For, as you know, about 150 years, people have debated the future of this hobby. Is there a chance for the future? Is it dying? What are your feelings on the future of philately?
There's a book called Bowling Alone. I've forgotten the name of the author. And it's a story, it's a sociological study and commentary on the fact that the recent generations, whatever you want to call them, X or millennials or whatever, they don't like to belong. They like to couch potato. They like to sit at home and text and research stuff on computers, but they don't like to bowl. They don't like to become Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts. It's not in what they look for. And this commentary is true because Lynn's used to do studies. I know when Michael Lawrence was there, I don't know if they've done one since, of how many people are in the hobby that are not associated and are not belongers. And he had it at about 5 to 1 outside the hobby, not belongers. And I think what we need to do is to reach those people. They're on eBay. If you see the trades that are on eBay, stuff going, I mean, it's massive. The amount of people, we've got to reach those people. We've got to give them a value added asset to show them that it's better to belong to organized philately than to be collecting alone. Someone said this morning that someone bought a cover for $700 and odd that was bad. That person doesn't belong. If they did, they would know about the foundation and the other expertising services, Apex, and they didn't. And they bought a cover that's fake, completely fake. It's a beautiful cover because it's fake. And the question was it a Fox creation or who, but that was irrelevant. So we've got to focus on this portion of the hobby that doesn't belong. And it's massively bigger than those who do belong. So that's that's the fertile ground for us.
The fertile ground, I think once some people understand some of those values, like you explain, they might be willing to change their ways.
You've got to give them a value add. Why do I need you? Well, camaraderie it's not the same thing as it used to be. To people of these new generations, they're used to texting. They're used to being, I don't want to say aloof, but it works, from belonging. So they don't see a need for it. We've got to give them a reason.
I do think the APS under Scott is undertaking some exciting new measures to try to reach these people, and I'm hoping for the best that way.
Agreed.
In conclusion, I just would like to ask, in your philatelic life and career, I'll even call it a philatelic career, what are some of the achievements you're most proud of? From exhibiting to special projects and initiatives?
I would say my greatest joy is team building and the mentorship that comes natural to me.
Mhm.
to do and to help. I didn't, I mean, the reason I became officer and president or leader or whatever the heck I became in these different organizations isn't, it's selfish. It was because I enjoyed it. It wasn't because of wanting to be honcho. It didn't figure in. It just, I enjoyed, that's why I say it's selfish. It was the enjoyment I got out of it
Mhm.
that made me do it, not for any other reason. So I would say that mentorship and team building is just part of my fabric.
And final, if you have to
Wait a
pick,
minute, you said final already.
this is final. So if you had to pick one favorite stamp in your life,
Oh.
it could be an 1847, it could be something issued for New York 2016 from another country even, what would be your favorite stamp? I know it's hard.
It's not hard. It's impossible for me. I've had so many close friends that I don't know. My favorite stamp. Huh. Well, I love them all. I'm sorry to say that, but I do. I mean, I love the Liberties. I have 40 frames of Liberty stamps well, not stamps, excuse me, postal history,
Mhm.
rates, usages, destinations, special circumstances, interrupted by war. These things fascinate me. So I'd have to say that I enjoy all of well, unfortunately, I don't have much foreign experience.
Mhm.
So I mean, there's the 1840 penny black, which is the first postage stamp in the world. So that's kind of like the impetus for stamp. I mean, from that we have everything else that followed. Although the U.S. had some early 1842 and 43 stamps. Anyway, I love them all. I don't have a favorite. I really don't.
It's okay.
I'm sorry.
Never met a stamp you didn't like. Yes.
They all have a place in my life, periods of time when I collected them, memories that occurred during the collection of or assembly of those stamps. So it's a moving target. It depends on when you ask me. Right now, I'd say my favorite stuff is the Postal History of the Liberty series because it's so vast, because it covered a period of time from 1954-ish to the stamps were actually the coil 2-cent and 25-cent stamps were manufactured up until 1990. 1990 from 1954, just those two stamps, but they were available for sale from the post office,
Sure.
the 2-cent and the 25-cent. So it has a tremendous lifespan, and it's a fun, and it's cheap. So you're not gonna buy one 1847 cover to Egypt, and it's gonna cost you $100,000.
Yeah.
This stuff doesn't cost you $100.
Yeah.
So it's fun to play with.
Good. Thank you for everything you've done for our hobby.
And you, Cheryl, now I'll talk about you. So just so you know, the interviewer here, I should be interviewing her, basically, for the accomplishments and dedication and the time that she spent. People say that if you got remunerated for your time while you were doing something, it shouldn't count. That's horse manure, because the energy and devotion that you put in at the Postal Museum and other things that I mean, the APS, you get a big salary from the APS?
As big as yours.
Yeah. So, we do it because we enjoy it. And as I said, I do it selfishly because I get pleasure from it. And you do the same thing because no one else would spend the time and effort that they do in the hobby, giving back. You don't, you know, it's, so anyway, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We give, but our rewards are greater than what we give. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending today.
Thank you.